So, Digby, in the last hour, we were talking about the Virginia House of Delegates, in Virginia, and really the elections that took place this past Tuesday at large. This was the first non-special election day. There was a special election. We didn't even get to that yet. That has fundamentally altered the nature of politics. One tiny state Senate election in a suburb of, I think it was of Seattle, that has changed really fundamentally changed the way business is going to be done in politics for a while out in the West Coast. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I want to just, 2 points. One, and I don't want to belabor this, but we were talking about where inspirations came from in terms of what we saw with so many people running for office in challenging Republicans across the board in these House of Delegate races. The data shows that Northam won this election basically because of women. I mean, not even basically. I mean, just runaway. And women of all ages, of broad economic background, socioeconomic background. We know that when research was done, particularly I think it was involving the Affordable Care Act, the first fight number 2, I think of the 3 or 4, that when they analyzed who was calling their senators and their congresspeople, it was overwhelmingly women. I saw a lot of, I follow indivisible groups and on Twitter, saw a lot of photos of people heading down to Virginia the day before. Not exclusively busloads of women, but the majority of the people on those buses were middle-aged women. And so this is a phenomena that, hopefully we can maintain it would be nice to maintain this permanently, because the story of this election, and certainly it will be the story of the 2018 election, was that sort of Barack Obama had a bit of this problem, or at least the Democrats in relation to Barack Obama, was off-year elections, you could not mobilize the coalition that Barack Obama did. And in this election, we saw a similar dynamic. We still need the data crunched a little bit more, because it wasn't just an absence of Trump voters being motivated to get to the polls. It was also a certain amount of disgust. And there was a lot more motivation than we typically see from Democrats, frankly, in this election. We get one of these every dozen years, it feels like, right? 2006, when there was such a high level of corruption in Congress. I mean, many people like to think that it was the Iraq War. I think that was part of it, but it was also because the leadership of the Republican Party in the House was implicated in covering up a serial predator, a sexual predator. And that looked pretty bad for them, on top of other corruption stories, which is, a lot more process oriented. I mean, the interesting thing about this election, and we're seeing this, of course, in the backdrop of like the Donna Brazil stuff. I don't want to get into it too much. I think it's a lot of, regardless of how messed up the DNC is and how compromised it was, it never had, and maybe this is a problem, frankly, it did not have the capacity to rig anything. And maybe that's a problem. Maybe we should have a stronger DNC that is able to actually, if it was in favor of one person or another, would actually be able to implicate the outcome. But what we're seeing is, and sometimes I think there's a conflation of people complaining that the DNC, that the Democratic Party, is on some level incompetent. Poorly run, larded down with consultants who don't have any accountability, who don't produce. And then there's also an ideological fight that's happening to a certain extent within the Democratic Party. I actually think the competence fight is the bigger of the two. The ideological, we're more conscious of because you and I are on Twitter all the time, but most people aren't. And that's where it plays out. Because certainly there was a sense of people were worried, if you're critical of the DNC, Donna Brazile is going to depress turnout in Virginia. No, not really. I mean, if she did, wow. But it didn't appear that way. And so there's this sort of sense, like you said earlier, the competency argument is sort of some people are just bypassing and saying, screw the Democratic Party, I'm going to go function it. We had the DSA candidate who beat the majority whip in the House without any support whatsoever from
the
Republican
majority whip. I mean, this guy was a wingnut, a real wingnut.
And almost necessarily, if you are the whip of the majority party, that means you can fundraise like nobody's business. Yeah. And this guy beat him, I guess, Adams, DSA member, beat him without any help from the Democratic Party in Virginia. He didn't want to give it to him. He didn't like their relationship with a power company there. All well and good, but the fact is that people are, took it upon themselves to build these things, and it was the fact that so many people did it that it created this wave.
Absolutely. I mean, look, it comes from two directions. I think that the DNC, it's been in tremendous turmoil over the past year, and rightly so. I mean, I honestly don't think anybody disagrees that the DNC was very, very poorly run throughout the Obama years, particularly under Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I mean, everybody on every side of this agrees with that particular analysis. So, that it has been problematic for many, many years, and progressives have been very, very, disappointed and critical of the Democratic Party under people like Rahm Emanuel, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and all the sort of the consultants and the people who just sort of are always running around under the surface, sort of creating this, it's kind of it's a singular feedback loop within the party that kind of it exempts voices from outside, and so it has made the party stale and having nothing new, nowhere, and I think that was a big problem and a big criticism of the Clinton campaign as well. Although I would find some reasons to disagree with that on the first female level, which I think was actually a potent thing. But on an ideological level, there's a lot to be said for that. However, I think 2016 changed it, and I think that over the last year, for all the turmoil that's been in the DNC, it's been a very healthy argument that's been happening. And on the ideology, I actually think we're not very far apart. I don't think it is a huge ideological argument. I think it's a tactical argument. I think what people are fighting over is whether or not you run a full-blown left-wing populist campaign, or whether or not you emphasize other issues in a way that will attract a different, it's base motivation versus trying to attract some of the Republican coalition that is economically disadvantaged and may actually listen to that. I don't think it's either or, and that's where this local thing comes in, because what we saw in Virginia is the model across the country. People ran local races. They ran races that were attuned. They were members of their community. They didn't listen to a bunch of, consultants from outside that don't know. They ran a race that was attuned to the people that they were actually trying to represent. And they ran as Democrats, even in places where, traditionally it might have been a more moderate area. They ran very much on economic justice issues. I mean, it's not like they were running away from it. I didn't hear of any
we said
of that.
A guy from DSA. Guy from DSA won, beat the whip. I mean, they started singing, solidarity songs right in their right. Victory party. All right, look, we got to take a break. I want to talk a little bit more about this. We'll be right back. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio, talking to the great Digby Heather Parton.